With massive layoffs in nearly every sector, weakness in manufacturing, car sales and housing, and the biggest one-month decline in the trade deficit since the financial crisis, the economic picture is not looking good. Bottom line, now is the time to own gold, which is why the experts at Stansberry Research just stepped forward with a major gold prediction, arguing gold could soar as high as $3,000 by the end of the year, possibly even higher. You can find out why and get instant access to their #1 gold investment today. It's not bullion, an ETF, or a mining stock, but in the past, this gold strategy could have made you nearly 50x your money. Considering how quickly the price of gold has been moving in recent weeks, you don't want to waste any time missing out on the gains these experts believe are in store for this gold stock. To get a copy of his new free report with all the details, simply go to goldmaniareport.com. Again, that's goldmaniareport.com for a free copy of his new report. Hi, this is Daniela Cambone. Welcome back to the Daniela Cambone Show, where our summer series continues with my longtime friend, Peter Grandich of Peter Grandich and Company. Peter, always good to have you on. Thank you for joining us for the summer series.
It's always a blessing and a joy to speak with you, so no problem on my end.
Well, I just love rounding up some of my old friends for the summer series and going over some of the major headlines. So let's start with this one, Peter, for you. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken just told CNN that the U.S. is attempting to strengthen lines of communication with China to avoid conflict between the two superpowers. This as Chinese leader Xi Jinping has welcomed his old friend, former United States Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, to Beijing. The visit on Thursday came as the U.S. and China have increasingly sought to improve their tanking relationship. 100 years old, Kissinger making the trip to China. Is that a signal to you?
Well, it was to me. I was quite surprised that there wasn't a lot of coverage or talk about, especially when you look at the photo that was used. Paulson is walking right behind them. So I don't think they went there for some good Chinese food. Obviously, they went either strictly on their own, but since Blinken has come out and said that, I got to feel they were encouraged by the current administration to go talk because things were deteriorating very, very fast. Now, I don't think anything is going to come dramatically from it, but I think they have a lot of respect for Kissinger because those who haven't been around the block might not remember, but Kissinger was one of the lead reasons that got China to open interest to the United States, and Nixon eventually traveled there. And for a while, it looked like China and the U.S. could work compatibly until most recent times. So this administration has had really no good foreign affairs success since they've been in charge, and I think they're trying to lessen the damage that they already have with China.
And it's especially interesting because we have the BRICS summit coming up in August. Russia and China apparently working on some sort of gold-backed currency along with the other nations. Do you think that was a topic of conversation?
I don't think that would be primary for what Kissinger would be there for. I know China is actively involved in the BRIC. I think we need to calm a little bit down about. I'm all for gold. You know that I'm very, very bullish. I'm all for eventually some sort of replacement to the U.S. dollar, but I don't think that's all occurring on August. I think what we need to recognize is that there's going to be a significant change. There's going to be a need for a competing world reserve currency, if not eventually a replacement. But I think that's important to recognize and what's happening here is that the United States is either being eliminated or limited in exposure on trade after 100 and something years of being a leader on trade. And I personally think when the BRIC stuff is all said and done over the next 1 to 3 years, it's going to perhaps be the most important thing for world trade since the Industrial Revolution. And so while I don't think everybody should get caught up that something magically is happening in August, but what's involving is very critical. And if we don't understand it or appreciate how the United States is going to be impacted overall negatively, in my opinion, then I think that could hurt our investments.
Peter, I was thinking Frank Juster because I talk BRICS all the time with him.
Hey, listen, I don't mind being compared to Frank Juster. It's okay.
Peter, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but why are you in support of the US dollar dominance ending?
Well, I'm not really in support as a U.S. citizen because
Right.
it's going to impact us. But I deal in the world of reality. That might can't understand why I'd be in junior resource stocks, but that's a story for another day. But I think what's really critical is to understand that there's changes in history, and we're seeing one. This is the beginning of the end of an empire that really dominated in the world for 100 or so years, and an opening to others, and the BRIC is going to be that. So I think we have to deal with the reality of it and the negatives that come with it, because what the negative most about this is, even if there isn't a total replacement, we know the dollar as a world reserve currency is declining overall. Less and less people are holding it.
Yeah.
But all those dollars are still out there, and we're creating more and more with our ever creation of money. That's all inflationary. And when those dollars come back here is when they have less places to go, it impacts us negatively. That's why I don't understand why mainstream Wall Street, who keeps talking about, we're going to go back to 2% or zero inflation and happy days are here again. I just don't see how that occurs if we keep printing money, keep getting indebted, and the world reserve currency is becoming less and less importance on the world stage.
I applaud you because I know how proud you are to be an American citizen, and yet you're able to say, a very balanced statement. Like, it's not an American-centric statement you've just made.
Well, when you've done this for 40 years, you kind of start to realize that the only thing that's going to keep you sane is to deal in the world of reality, even though Wall Street many times can be an unreality type of place. And I think the reality is that we're going through, America's facing its worst ever social, political, and economic period. I think it will rival the Depression, and it will rival even the Civil War on the social side of things. We're losing a lot of things. We're losing the middle ground. We're losing the middle class. And all these things are going to impact our investments. And I don't think the professional community now, especially the youth within that community, understands this more than the Fed just cutting rates and you buy stocks and they just keep going up and up. And these type of things are going to have impacts on anybody that's investing for multiple years out.
Well said, Peter. I mean, now that we're on the topic of new currencies, let's talk central bank digital currencies. I thought this news item was interesting, that jobs related to central bank digital currencies are popping up across the globe. At least 3 Federal Reserve outposts are actively seeking candidates to join their teams for CBDC research and improving current systems. There are already 3 fully fledged CBDCs out there. There's the Inera in Nigeria, the Sand Dollar in Bahamas, and the Jamdex in Jamaica. So it's interesting now, the Fed Now payment system was launched in the US. Yes, it's not a CBDC. Some would argue it's the infrastructure to one. So no surprise that we're going to need people developing central bank digital currencies if this is the future we're headed for.
Oh, there's no question the future we're heading. There's no question, while I'm not a huge cryptocurrency fan, I'm certainly not a Bitcoin fan, but I do believe blockchain technology is going to be useful. And one of the things I think that's going to be talked about as we see this BRIC nation stuff develop is, you have a great guest, and I only learned of him because of you having him in the past, and that's Vince Lancy. And Vince has talked about this digital gold coming alive, and how a great way that is going to be for countries to trade and all. And I think that's where the combination of gold and blockchain technology is going to come. And so all these digital and type of talk is real. It's hard for old-fashioned boomers like me to think that pocket money is going to become almost non-existent, but it's the way of the world, and that's where it's going. And you wouldn't have all those job seekings if this wasn't full-fledged ahead, and it is. It's where the world is heading, and whether we like it or not, we got to get used to it.
And you know what's interesting? I had a lot of experts on that were sure that the U.S. would be the first to launch a central bank digital currency. I mean, apart from the 3 that I've mentioned, but I mean in terms of world powers. But Russia's President Vladimir Putin just signed the digital ruble bill into law, allowing the country's central bank to issue its own digital currency. I mean, it's almost like a race to the digital currency is heating up. I mean, we know that China already has that in place, and other countries are working on pilot projects, but we could see a central bank digital currency full-on currency race here.
I think one of the reasons is because the Fed has had disharmony behind the scenes. I don't think the Federal Reserve can hold its head up high over these last few years. First of all, they stayed way too long on the printing money side. Then they used that word that will forever be banned. If you work for the Fed, you can never say it again, and that's transitory, because that's what inflation
I thought you were
was.
going to say pivot also.
Well, pivot is another one that'll probably be eventually.
Yeah.
And of course, we're entering an election period of time where, the Federal Reserve naturally likes to pull back because they don't normally like to act aggressively during a presidential election. So I think the United States is behind, but I think it's going to join it. And I think it's just the way where the world is going these days.
Well, to your point, I mean, there was a Bloomberg report that found that after a year of solid agreement amongst Fed officials that higher interest rates were needed, differences among policymakers have now started to greatly deepen. We know Powell was more of the centrist. He had been talking that higher rates were needed. I mean, on the other end, we saw Carlyle's Rubenstein, who basically said, but the Fed needs inflation to get out of the debt that the U.S. is in. So it's, do they want the inflation or not? I mean, it almost seems to me they need the inflation.
At the end of the day, they have to choose it. Listen, there's two huge problems for the United States. One is enormous. You've talked about it for all the years I've known you. It's only gotten worse, and you've had great guests about it. The debt crisis. I mean, it's a crisis. When you see that we were just a few months ago talking about a debt ceiling, and as soon as that was over, we almost added another $1 trillion. It's still hard for me to talk in trillions. When I entered this business 40 years ago, we were the world's largest credited nation. The CBO says we're going to be at $50 trillion in hard debt in less than 10 years. It's the servicing of the interest alone is going to be an extreme big challenge, if not something that can't be done. And we talk as if, there's really no problems long term. We just have to get over whatever little humps are in the road. And that's not the case. And so when you add that to a retirement crisis, I just say that, these things are just huge challenging. And the easier way always for a politician and is inflation versus deflation. Deflation is horrible. We saw that in the Depression. No one wants to go through that again. So they will choose inflation over deflation, no matter what they may say politically at the moment.
This is our summer series, and we like to get people prepared as September creeps up. And like you said, we're going to have a presidential campaign on our hands. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of gladiator-like fights happening. We know from the past you've been a strong supporter of Donald Trump. Now we see RFK's popularity rising. Any change in stance for you, Peter?
Well, I happen to pay a lot of respect to Kennedy. I said even this morning on a blog post, while we have differences of opinions, you have to respect the man. And if I had to vote Democratic, he's the only person I see of any major consequences there that I think could be acceptable for myself and how I view myself as a citizen. Donald Trump is a unique situation. You're right. There was a period of time. I've lessened my view because I just wish his arrogance and his ego would take a lower stance, and some of his ideas that are very good take a bigger stance. And I don't know, even if he's elected, if the battle that he had in his first 4 years can only get worse, that the people are going to dislike him even more so. I always like to joke whenever there's a problem, I expect someone to say, well, it's Trump's fault. And I don't know how useful that would be if he is the president. So this is a very quagmire. And the unknown yet, Daniela, is the Biden situation with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and all, will it gain more legs? Will we be in a few months talking about impeachment or more people showing that it is what some of us think it was? Or does it somehow roll over? Because currently the mainstream media is playing the Sergeant Schultz. We don't know nothing. We don't see nothing. Don't want to know anything. But I don't know how long that can keep happening if more and more people and more facts come out to show that these things actually occurred. And then what does that do? And I'll just tell you this, and that's nothing to do because she's a female. But the two worst words that could ever happen to our markets is President Harris. If that was to happen overnight, I don't think we'll ever see anything react as we will to something like her suddenly becoming the president of the United States.
Peter, I guess as we wrap this, the other news item I wanted to bring up was this historic hearing on UFO sightings after Intel officials claim military stumbled upon an alien crash site. I mean, are you paying attention to the UFO story, or is this all a distraction for something else?
Well, I think the one thing that we've seen in all the movies we watched over the years that won't happen if it's true is they're going to, if they clearly been watching us, there's no way they're going to say, take us to your leaders. I mean, if they have any brains at all, why would they want to be taken to our leaders? They can actually see how bad they are. But in all actuality, as someone who's strong in his faith, I leave things open. I don't know. I mean, so many of these sightings and things and experiences, but I guess it makes good fodder for people and media and all that kind of stuff. But I think we have bigger issues to deal with at the moment than worrying about whether there's UFOs or not.
I'm more terrified of artificial intelligence, to be honest, Peter.
Oh, there's no question about that. I think that's the story of the decade, and the type of work. If I was, 20 or 30 years younger, I'd be questioning in certain professions whether they'll even be able to exist. And of course, when you watch and think about how dangerous that could be and the dangers to it and all, it can get you scary. But I try to find peace for me, at least, in that my faith and where I don't think this is the one and only stop in life will get me through any fears that artificial intelligence can bring up.
As we wrap our summer series here, let's end it on a lighter note, but a happy note, very happy note. Joe Klecko being inducted into the Hall of Fame. I know he's a good friend of yours.
Yeah, so anybody that's been a Jet fan, like the woman I'm speaking to, has not had a lot to cheer for a lot of years. But one of the sports, there's two sports injustices in the New York tri-state area. One, Ron Greshner, who played for the Rangers, number was never retired, in my opinion. And two, all the years Joe Klecko was left out of the Hall of Fame. But in a few days, not too far from now, he'll be enshrined at Canton, Ohio. And for Jet fans, seeing two of their players go in, and of course, the hopes that Aaron Rodgers now brings to them is classic line for a Jet fan with this is hope springs eternal. And that is what a Jet fan has right now. And
if I can share, Peter graciously had offered me tickets to go to the Hall of Fame to see that, but unfortunately I could not make it due to some summer plans. But that's just the kind of guy Peter is. So thank you, Peter.
Well, you kind of dragged me back about 5 years ago doing interviews after a few years, and it is always a pleasure, and it's amazing to watch how your career has gone, Daniela, and the people you're speaking to, and the things that I'm still learning after 40 years because of the people you're speaking to. God bless you.
Well, God bless you as well, Peter. We need more people like you. I want to wish you and your beautiful family a good rest of your summer, and we'll see you in September. Is there anything you're doing or planning or prepping in your financial world?
The only thing I'm hoping for after the worst experience of losses in my career in the junior mining resource business, that I didn't somehow miss the bell that they rang and it was over. And instead, this is going to turn out to be the best buying opportunity. And I hope it's the latter, not the former, so I can stay married.
Well, we're all rooting for you, Peter. Okay.
Thank you.
And I know she's not going to leave your side no matter what. So don't worry about that. But I'm still rooting for you and praying for you. Thank you, Peter. And thank you all for watching. We'll have much more great content coming your way on our summer series. So be sure to stay tuned to the Daniela Camboni Show and sign up at danielacamboni.com. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.
Opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the contributor and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Stansberry Research, its parent company, or affiliates.